TDE has proven itself to be a powerhouse label in hip-hop, and I'd argue that they're doing some of the best work when it comes to producing high-quality conceptual albums that are engaging, thought-provoking, accompanied by impressive, theatrical, and literally blockbuster quality videos. So far on my channel, I've looked at and analyzed older albums, so I thought for this video I would do a album analysis on one of my favorite releases this year, Schoolboy Q's Blue Lips. Schoolboy Q's rollout of albums since his debut has shown nothing but great consistency and progression as an artist. He has an amazing discography that is solid in quality and a unique tone of voice that complements his rapping style. Oxymoron was iconic, and Blank Face is revered as one of his greatest albums. It's been 5 years since his last release, Crash Talk, but as the saying goes, good things take time, and his newest 6th studio album, Blue Lips, is definitely a testament to that. Before I jump into the analysis, let's talk a little bit about who Schoolboy Q is. Schoolboy Q was born in Germany, but later moved to the south central of LA, specifically to 51st near Hoover Street. Growing up, his friends used to call him Schoolboy, but his real name is Quincy, thus the name Schoolboy Q. He's well known for having been part of the Hoover Crips, which still plays a huge role in his music as he incorporates many innuendos and references to gang and Crip culture. He began rapping in his late teens and early 20s, and was introduced to TDE, namely one of the managers, Punch, in 2006. This was also around the same time he met Kendrick Lamar, J-Rock, and Ab-Soul, with whom he would later form the group Black Hippie in 2009. Schoolboy Q officially joined TDE in 2010 and released his debut album Setbacks, followed by Habits and Contradictions, Oxymoron, Blank Face, Crash Talk, and now Blue Lips. We're currently in a fast-paced, algorithmic-based music listening era, and interestingly enough, how Q approached Blue Lips was kind of in response to this. Q explained during the Back on Fig listening party that the whole idea for Blue Lips was to make the album like one continuous listening experience. This goes against the current trend of making albums packed with singles in hopes that one will go viral and be placed on playlists, something Q believes dominates the music world right now. Audiences seem less interested in listening to albums from start to finish, not appreciating them as full bodies of work. Today's listeners now have the ease of relying on their algorithms from platforms like Apple Music, TikTok, and Spotify to recommend them playlists and songs that it thinks they would like, completely removing them from the experience of exploring, discovering, and listening to albums fully from start to finish. This detachment also prevents them from hearing albums conceptually and really digesting them, which is crucial for a visual, story-like album such as Blue Lips. Let's look at some of the major themes of this album. From the start, Q gave us everything we need to know about Blue Lips, starting with a literal definition. There are 3 parts to this definition, so I'm going to look at each part to reveal how they tie into the themes of this album. When naming the album, Q shared on his interview with Nadeska that he initially wanted to title it Me, not necessarily using the word me, but with the idea that the album would represent him. By titling the album Blue Lips, it becomes clear that it's more than just a reference to Crip culture. It's a personal reflection, with Q himself symbolically having blue lips. The first definition of blue lips can be described as 1. Speechless, especially as a temporary result of shock or some strong emotion, and 2. Of a person or mood shocked, speechless, or embarrassed. For example, the crowd gave me blue lips. There is also a clever linkage to the word cyanosis in the definition, which is a medical term for when your fingers, nails, and lips turn blue due to the decreased amount of hemoglobin in red blood cells, which would make sense because of the whole referencing to being a Crip. So if Q metaphorically has blue lips, meaning he's speechless, what exactly is he speechless about? Q's introspective journey is evident throughout his interviews and throughout the album's lyrics. After 5 long years, Q reminds us who he is, what he's accomplished, and his successes, but also reveals his losses and shortcomings, emphasizing that success also comes with sacrifice. This recurring theme runs through tracks like First, Nunu, Ohio, Blue Sides, Foo, and Lost Times. Q uses introspective lyrics to frame how far he's come in his achievements and personal growth in a bittersweet and almost melancholic light. Throughout Blue Lips, Q expresses a state of shock and speechlessness as he looks back on his career, life, and their impact on him. However, speechlessness isn't synonymous with satisfaction. Reflecting on his previous album Crash Talk, Q shared on the Back on Fig podcast that it was his least introspective album. Even though it performed well, it still left me empty because it was me, but I was in a space of transitioning to where I was at. I was super drug-free, super daddy, but I didn't know how to get rid of the gangster image. image. So despite his success, Q still struggled with feelings of unfulfillment and being disconnected from his evolving identity. Since Crash Talk, however, the approach to Blue Lips is noticeably different. Before, audiences could easily point out singles that brought Q commercial success, like That Part from Blankface or Collard Greens from Oxymoron. But Blue Lips doesn't have a standout single, and that's intentional. Q has shifted his focus, wanting to bring listeners back to the art of the album by creating a cohesive listening experience. In the Back on Fig making of Blue Lips BTS, Q expressed that this album wasn't designed with commercial success in mind, but as an artistic expression, a rebellion against the music industry's expectations. This too is a response to the pressures of living up to the reputation he had built, a burden that left him feeling speechless. Throughout interviews and behind the scenes videos during the album's promotion, Q repeatedly used the word suppressed to describe his feelings. I found it interesting that he commonly used the word suppressed, and even though I know what it means, I decided to look up the literal definition for it: to prevent the development, action, or expression of a feeling, impulse, or idea, to restrain, which echoes the notion of speechlessness. In the past, Q felt creatively restrained by making albums that guaranteed success but didn't allow him to express his true self, wanting to break out of the pop record box. With Blue Lips, Q breaks free of those constraints, creating space for authentic expression. This is reaffirmed in his interview with Nadeska, where Q shared his frustrations with feeling trapped by the industry and people's perceptions. You build yourself up to be this thing, and then you realize, what did I do? I run into people and they expect me to be this energetic drug addict guy or a sad rapper. This could also explain why many aspects of Blue Lips reference Black culture and arts from the 70s. For example, the majority of the samples are taken from the 70s. You can hear the Watts Prophets poetry, and there are visual and conceptual references to Blaxploitation. The 70s were a prolific time for Black American history, as the Black Power movement empowered the rising Black arts movement, allowing many talented Black Americans to fully voice, express, and represent themselves authentically in media arts and literature, especially after years of suppression and misrepresentation in the media, which was always more centered on white people. I feel like this referencing of the 70s, combined with this feeling of suppression and not having a voice, with Blue Lips meaning speechlessness, followed by this climactic moment of breaking out and authentically expressing yourself truly, ties in well with the album's themes. This also links to the usage of all the 70s samples and strong beat switches that oscillate between deep introspective lyrics and Q's signature gangster, boastful, explicit sound. Beyond speechlessness, there's another part to the Blue Lips definition. The second part of the definition involves a derogatory term often associated with racist caricatures and the behavior of people who purposely perpetuate racist stereotypes for entertainment or acceptance. Q plays off this term, relating it to the feeling of adhering to expectations, knowing that it'll bring success but not truly aligning with who he is. He also references it frequently in relation to snitches. In his interview with Nadeska, Q reflects on his regrets for doing stupid shit in the past and expresses his newfound comfort in being his true self without having to perform. In his interview with Rolling Stone, he also mentions the idea of manning up and owning up to it, in reference to being honest about what you do or don't do. If Q isn't living it, he won't put it out in his music. There is an important moment in his Rolling Stone interview that sheds light on this theme. Q recalled, "So I'm doing a golf commercial and they're like, yo, put your grill in." It's like, what does that mean? What if I told the Asian guy to bring his chopsticks or some shit? Go put your grill in? It's just like, make sure you're black. It was just weird shit and I would do it. I've done it, and then one time I just didn't do it. Any fucking thing I did with golf, they would try to make me be extra black. Then me just doing it, knowing it, and then being like, why would he say that? You get older and you educate yourself on certain things and you realize that maybe that wasn't the right thing for me to say. Why not admit it instead of being silent about it? This brings us full circle. Blue Lips isn't just about speechlessness or playing off a derogatory term. It's also about becoming fully aware and clear in one's own understanding and sense of self, which is the final part of the Blue Lips definition. After a period of reflection, Q emerges with clarity, breaking free from suppression, speechlessness, expectations, and expresses himself vulnerably and authentically. The album from start to finish follows a transformational storyline where Q reintroduces us to the Q that we were formerly familiar with, then moves us through his period of reflection, owning up to his bad habits, mistakes, his transformation, and growth to this newer, more open and matured Q. Ultimately, this album is about reflection, vulnerability, pain, identity, and most importantly, growth. Throughout the album, there are some recurring motifs that help reinforce the themes just covered. Crips/the Hoover Crips. This is not surprising. Crip culture will likely never leave Q's work or music, as his history of being a Crip is deeply tied to who he is and his past. Fatherhood. As a father of 3, Q shares intimate details and emotions throughout the album about striving to be a good and supportive father. He opens up about the difficulties of balancing fame and family life. Snitching. Many songs on Blue Lips address snitching or the betrayal that comes with it. Q ruthlessly attacks people who snitch, not just lyrically but also visually. The Thank God For Me music video clearly depicts a snitch or informant with a mic taped under his shirt getting caught and beaten. The motive of snitching could also relate back to the use of the C word, which can mean someone who is a sellout, betraying their own for validation or acceptance of another group. The past. This is an obvious motive throughout the album. The introspective lyrics of Blue Lips rely heavily on Q looking back at his past, from his childhood to his debut with TDE, throughout his career, to becoming a father, and to where he is now. We also got to see some home videos of Q from when he was younger, a very vulnerable and intimate thing to share that highlights Q's authenticity and shows how his upbringing shaped who he is today. Blaxploitation. Blaxploitation refers to a film subgenre that centers around Black characters and quote-unquote Black themes in an effort to appeal to Black audiences back in the 70s. The main reference for this motive is Ralph Bakshi's notoriously controversial film Seaskin, also called Street Fight. Although the film isn't exactly a blaxploitation movie, it was created to mock the genre. The chaotic, grimy atmosphere of the film parallels the vibes of Blue Lips with its intricate, complex sound and beat switches. If you watch Street Fight, you'll notice that the plot alternates between bustling, violent city crime scenes and moments where characters reflect while jazz plays in the background. And a direct sample from Street Fight can be heard in the track Movie. Q also explained in his Nadeska interview that the idea of Blue Lips plays off the racist stereotype of big red lips, but because of Q's background as a Crip, naturally the lips are blue. I'm gonna dive a little bit deeper into this motive when I do the lyrical and music video analysis for Lost Times and Urine 101. So let's talk about the sound of the album. Produced by Tay Beast, JLBS, Sky Hutch, The Alchemist, Lo the Great, Devin Malik, Childish Major, Kyle Banks, and DJ Khalil, to name a few. Blue Lips sonically is complex and progressive. The rhythms and flows constantly shift, and majority of the songs are accompanied with dynamic beat switches that alters the listener's experience as they delve deeper into the album. The direction of some of the tracks pivot between West Coast style productions such as G-Funk and iconic 70s jazz and R&B. The frequent use of 70s jazz is strategic, as mentioned before, and is fittingly placed in as intros, outros, riffs, or bridges that helps pivots the listener's experience, providing them different perspectives to interpret or reflect on the song's meanings in alternative ways. Some notable samples include 49 Reasons by Julius Brockington in Thank God For Me, which begins as a beautifully melancholic and suave opener that then shifts into an upbeat, triumphant track. Ohio perfectly exemplifies the use of complex patterns and switches, sampling David T. Walker's The Windows of the World before transitioning into an LA G-Funk beat. Foo featuring Absol samples the duo's previous track, Druggies with Hoes Again, from Schoolboy Q's second album, Habits and Contradictions. Both rappers bring their developed skills and techniques to the same beat and song we all know and love, but with a new, matured perspective. A notable sample used in this song is from the Watts Prophets, a groundbreaking and significant poetry group from Los Angeles formed and named after the 1965 Watts riots. You can also hear them sampled in Germany 86. There are also some fun and interesting samples. Thank God For Me samples Project Pat's Chicken Head, and Back in Love samples Look at Wrist by Father, I Love McConan, and Key. So let's dive deeper into the lyrical analysis. We were also blessed to receive 8 music videos and a lot of content for this album's rollout, so I'm gonna do a little bit of a music video analysis with the songs that had music videos with it, and this will also give us more context onto the themes and motives of this album. Funny Guy. Funny Guy is the opening track of the album. I did a little bit of a compare and contrast between this song and Smile, because throughout Funny Guy, the lyrics "You make me smile" are heard again in the song Smile. But the tone between both songs is so different. Funny Guy sounds almost satirical, as if Q is summoning all the typical things that people associate his lyrics with: hoes, money, and drugs. There's also a Super Mario sample referencing Q's nickname Groovy, the G standing for Gangsta. Pop featuring Rico Nasty. This is one of my favorite tracks on the album that almost feels like a shot to the chest. I love the static and subtle western sound in the beginning, right before the beat switches to an eerie boom bap beat with horrorcore-like synths. The song reminds me of a menacing western quick draw match, which suits the repeating pop lyrics reminiscent of gunshots. Overall, the song talks about Q's accomplishments, especially in the gangster rap genre. Fun fact, but Pop was produced by Beat Butcha, who shared on Instagram that it was inspired by Black Sabbath, so there definitely is a heavy metal influence to it as well. Thank God for Me. Thank God for Me starts out slow and melancholic before plunging into a menacing trap beat that samples Project Pat's Chicken Head. The whole song is about snitching, betrayal, and Q calling out fakes and liars. Q compares himself to people who sell out to others for acceptance, while he remains loyal, which keeps him respected and successful. The music video for this song is amazing. Following the sonic direction of the music, the video tells the story of a snitch getting caught and beat. In the opening scene, you can clearly see a blue mic taped to the inside of the snitch's shirt. Q is then lying on a sofa with close-ups of multiple clocks above him, symbolizing time going by. The next frame shows Q looking down at the camera, positioning himself in a more powerful angle, while three angels hover around, almost as if they're protecting him. So I could be overanalyzing, but I thought the three angels also represented the angel number 333, which means protection, guidance, support, and creativity. In that same angle, a shot of a group of Crips follows Sweet. They could be the angels that Q is symbolically referring to that give him protection and support. Once the beat switches, the snitch gets surrounded, caught, and thrown into this building, I think. From there, the video takes a whole other direction, with dynamic turns and transitions that make it seem like everything was taken in one shot. There is a frame of Q standing next to what looks like an early Christian-inspired art piece of him in a car. I'll be very honest, it was hard for me to interpret this painting because I'm not really familiar with Christianity or Christian-inspired art, but after staring at it for at least 10 minutes straight, I noticed that one of the little guys on the right side of the painting was holding up a blue mic, which was the same blue mic that the snitch was wearing from the beginning of the video, and is handing it back to the haloed men on the blue donkey. The halos around their heads could denote them as angels, which connects back to the previous three angels / Crip shot. You can tell by their facial expressions in the art piece that they are very displeased with the snitch. Also, the snitch is being held up by another guy, almost like he's being delivered after getting caught. In the golf cart, you can see Q with a cruciform halo representing someone of the Holy Trinity, which links back again to 333 or the three angels. In the next frame, the group of men behind Q look like the same group of men from the painting. You'll also notice in the painting there are two Qs, one in his white tee and another in his black tee. I couldn't really figure out what this meant. Maybe an older version of Q driving towards a newer version of himself. The only clips we see of Q wearing the black tee are when he's outside, so maybe this could be his older self going towards the Q who's escaped this building filled with distrustful people, or from feeling trapped inside. There's also like a whole portion on the side that's like super dark, and I couldn't really make out like what anything was. So if anyone has any insights on what that is or what they think the painting is, let me know, because I don't know, man. The next scene in the video is very short but extremely symbolic. Q looks into what appears to be a mirror but instead plunges into water. This is a reference from a 1930s French film by Jean Cocteau, Blood of a Poet. Prior to the selected scene that is referenced in the music video, there's actually a whole part in Blood of a Poet where a poet wipes a drawing of lips onto a statue. The statue then comes to life and asks him if he thinks it's possible to close the mouth of a wound, and that the only way to do so is to jump into this mirror pool. The symbolic scene of the poet, or Q jumping into the mirror, represents the pain and difficulties of facing and reflecting on oneself before jumping into the subconscious of their mind. There is more to Blood of a Poet, so I will return to this reference later. Blue Sides is one of the most introspective tracks on the album. The solemn beats intertwine with Q's vulnerable lyrics as he shares his feelings about many of the hardships he's gone through, like the pain of growth, depression and mental health, loss, the death of friends, and the pressure of living up to expectations. Throughout Blue Slides, there is a heavy emphasis on community, reflecting on friendships, and how Q shows up as a friend or father while balancing his life as an artist. Many think that this track is about Mac Miller, who was a friend of Q's, especially since there are lyrics about losing friends to drugs, and because Mac has an album called Blue Slide Park. However, Q confirmed in multiple interviews that the song isn't actually about Mac, explaining that he wouldn't want to exploit his death for a song, and that it was actually about losing other friends to drugs. Urine 101. In Urine 101, the first thing to notice is that the song starts and ends with the same line of someone asking Q how they can basically be like him. From this, we can infer that this song is Q's 101 on his lifestyle or who he is. Q begins describing his successes, work ethic, and how far he's come from where he started. For example, young black boy running got me out of that field, made a living off game, you should get it on film, refers to his history playing football in high school and how he's made it now as an artist. Through comparison and contrast, Q explains what differentiates him from others and the reasons for his success. When the door got closed, I don't feel too bad, I'ma run a mine up, I'ma have some stash. This illustrates that failure doesn't stop him and ultimately he overcomes challenges. There are so many layers to this music video, so I'm gonna try to be as concise as possible. The opening scene shows Q on the balcony of a plantation house. These scenes were actually filmed on a real plantation, digging deep into these feelings of suppression while reflecting on how far Q has come given America's racist history. There is an interesting shot when the camera zooms in on the house. It appears there are 3 versions of Q walking inside, symbolizing and referring back to the many times throughout Blue Lips where Q mentions feeling trapped in his head or in his house. There is a bar, got a brand new house, trying to avoid my hurt, revealing that even though Q has bought a symbol of success, a big house, he still faces depression. When the camera zooms out, Q is walking above the house, and later you see the same house explode, which could symbolize breaking free from feeling trapped or suppressed, and this is further emphasized by the fact that it's a plantation house. Then there's this red screen. Anyone who edits videos probably recognizes this screen pretty well. It's the Adobe Premiere screen for lost media. This is shown a couple times throughout the video as a way to break the fourth wall, which Q is doing a lot of in these music videos. I also think this usage of breaking the fourth wall is like a rebellion against the music industry's expectations to what a proper music video should look like. I literally can't think of another music video that shows the Adobe Premiere lost media screen. Next, we see Q walking on a red carpet before entering a huge hall filled with seemingly successful people. Then we see shots of Q walking with them, but everyone is getting heavily rained on. However, Q doesn't show any reaction. The rain could symbolically represent Q's emotions or tears that he's pouring out, especially with the introspective nature of Blue Lips. This could also link to the man that's standing inside the pool, representing sitting in one's emotions before pouring it out via the rain. An interesting angle in this music video is the set direction narrative. Q rides into the set, disturbing people in the process. He's then being directed by these older white men. The shot zooms into the set camera and Q and his friends get turned into an animation, paying homage to Ralph Bakshi's Street Fight, which famously alternated between real actors and animations. Later, the same directors direct another man who has an afro, does a martial arts kick, and sucks on a blue lollipop, obviously giving him blue lips. This caricature of a guy with an afro and 70s fit is found in many blaxploitation films. You can see one in Street Fight and John Coney's Space is the Place, which was also listed as a reference on the Urine 101 cover. Overall, this character links back to the blaxploitation motive, adhering to stereotypes or expectations for approval. Eventually, you see him rip off the afro and storm off set, obviously frustrated and fed up. However, in contrast, when Q and his friends are directed by these white men, they just laugh back in their face, showing that Q doesn't adhere to expectations or seeks acceptance. I also felt like Q and his friends laughing back at the directors kind of related to the song Funny Guy. Eventually, Q is back in his car and breaks out of the set by driving through a huge poster of the track listing for Blue Lips, symbolically communicating his break from suppression, expectations, and creative limitations. There's also a visual reference to the motif of fatherhood. We see a scene of a woman with 2 daughters watching multiple screens of Q in past interviews, denoting the dissonance between him as an artist and a father. Finally, there's a scene of Q being drawn by a group of kids in an art room. He's sitting and looking down, but in another shot you can see water dripping down his hat, making it look like he's crying. This could represent people painting an image of what they think of him. Someone is also sculpting a mold of his face that later gets stepped on, presumably by Q. You can see a clear shot of this in the Nunu music video. I want to link this back to Blood of a Poet because after this scene where the poet jumps into the mirror pool, he comes back and destroys the statue that told him to go in. win. Then the narrator says, by breaking statues, one risks becoming one with oneself. By Q breaking this mold, or in the final scene where the mirrors around him are breaking, it symbolizes him breaking free from past versions / reflections of himself, the mold and image that people create of him, and coming into his true self. Lovebirds featuring Devin Malik and Lansky Walker. The song starts off like a promising R&B love song, sampling the Sacred Soul's Can I Call You Rose, before completely switching to an abrupt, sinister beat where Q and Devin Malik boast about their lifestyles, specifically regarding women. The song oscillates between the sinister, dark beat and Lansky Walker's R&B chorus / verse. Q and Devin Malik are acknowledging the bad habits of their lifestyles and owning up to their mistakes. For cooties, Q gave us another definition. In the cooties definition, the first thing I noticed was that the synonym was rat, so this links back to the snitching motive. However, the actual definition is 1 germs, aka most of y'all leave me alone, followed with the credits to the song. Cooties is about people who are like germs that are coming to get Q while he has bigger, more pressing issues to deal with. While reflecting on what he's achieved, specifically a nice house, he discusses some of his personal challenges in the song. He mentions again the feeling of being trapped, being a father, and touches on school shootings and protecting his kids. There seems to be an emphasis on this house on the hills, and this, again, referencing of being trapped, as the music video, released a bit before the debut of the album, is also shot inside of a house. I'm not sure if it's the same one that was on the plantation, but nonetheless, it feels like Q is emphasizing his shock towards his success, feeling trapped by it, and his focus on staying away from unloyal people, especially in the definition when it says leave me alone, to focus more on himself. Ohio featuring Freddie Gibbs. Ohio is a really fun track that features 3 prominent beat switches. The intro is chill and jazzy while Q reflects on his achievements before the song shifts to an eerie, atmospheric trap beat. The main portion of the song is Q talking down to someone who's not on his level. Then there's another beat switch that returns to jazz as the lyrics take a more introspective turn. One thing I really like about this track is how it kind of sounds like a movie, where at the end people are talking, laughing, and cheering, almost as if it's in response to what Q and Freddie Gibbs are rapping about. In the last verse, it's clear that Q is referring to his past self, and it sounds a little bit almost like he's speaking about himself in the third person. Foo featuring Ab Soul. As mentioned before, Foo samples the duo's previous track, Druggies with Hoes Again, and the Watts Prophets. The track feels like both Q and Ab-Soul are revisiting past versions of themselves, adding on to their iconic track while reflecting on the repercussions of the lifestyles and habits they once enjoyed. The bridge sounds like a rhythmic loop that feels almost hypnotic, emphasizing how hard it is to break out of these habits. First is another experimental track with many different elements. The background synths provide an eerie, sinister sound that is signature to Memphis trap, while Q boasts about his successes and riches. There's a beat switch halfway through the song that slows things down, where Q opens up about the reality behind his success. The lines "half of my purchases, full of my tears" indicate that all the things Q bought came at the sacrifice of his emotions and stress he invested into his work. Family to feed, only speak when I bleed, lost so much time I can never recoup, reveals the pressure of being a father and the balance between time spent working versus being with family. Finally, stuck in my head like a prisoner cell, I'm full of myself, mirror in front just to even the scale, references Q's feelings of suppression and being trapped, as well as how he reflects on himself to balance his feelings of arrogance. Nunu. Nunu has an airy, fresh sound with whimsical chimes that juxtapose harsh drums that give more weight to the song. The lyrics are heavier in subject matter as Q reflects on all the people who've doubted him or didn't believe he could make it in his career. The music video shows him sitting on the porch of a plantation house, tying this back to feelings of being suppressed, looked down upon, and being underestimated. I really love how he's rapping into his phone, which is a pretty common practice when people start out as rappers. It's like he's channeling into his beginnings. Toward the end of the music video, we get a panned out shot of Q on the balcony of a huge plantation house, symbolizing his journey from the bottom, the porch, to the top, now looking down as he reflects on where he and his people came from. We also get extra shots that give us more context to Urine 101, such as him standing at the top of the stairs while people run towards him, symbolizing his fame and success as an artist. Finally, we see clearer shots of the mold being stepped on, corresponding perfectly with the ending lyrics of the song about Q becoming a new version of himself. Back in Love featuring Devin Malik. Essentially, Q is telling us that he's back while talking about his successes and lifestyle, contrasting against haters who talk a lot but in reality have nothing to their name. There's also one line by Devin Malik, "If you disregard my angels, we can't let you in," which could refer back to the angel symbolism for the crew of friends or Crips that was shown in the Thank God For Me music video. In Back in Love's music video, Q shares some home videos of himself when he was younger, emphasizing his authenticity and that he is who he says he is. Lost Times featuring Jossie. It starts off triumphant and positive before switching into a melancholic, jazzy, and gloomy track that samples Japanese folk artist Kiyoshi Hasegawa. This is one of the more depressing songs on the album as Q reflects on his past, opening up about all the time lost trying to fix bad habits, alcoholism, dealing with betrayal, fake friends, learning from failures, and the weight of success. The music video is very interesting. This is where I first caught the reference to Ralph Bakshi, who was infamous for using animation and cartoons in a more adult manner. I thought it was really clever to transform all the cartoons into black characters, almost like Q is recreating his own version of Street Fight. Usually when one thinks of Disney or Looney Tunes, you think of singing, dancing, jokes, and etc. But all the clips in this video are more violent, depressing, and filled with anger or grief. There are also more evil or deceptive characters than positive ones. Again, this references Ralph Bakshi's work where cartoonish characters, despite their appearance, reflect the raw truth of human nature and society, matching perfectly with the lyrics to Lost Times. Germany 86. Germany 86 is an extremely touching song appreciating Q's mother for everything she's done for him growing up. The whole song touches upon feelings of pain, the pain of growing up, the pain of losing loved ones, the pain of reflecting on the past, and the pains of trying to be a good father. The title is a reference to Q having been born in 1986 in Germany. Time Killers. Time Killers is an interesting track. It's very experimental, moody, and brooding, with a lot of vocal distortion that makes it sound almost schizophrenic. The track is about exactly what the title suggests, wasting time, specifically in the studio. Some indicators of this is the term night shift, referring to working late nights in the studio, and Q repeatedly saying, on, turn me on. The song then pivots to Q referencing his past and how far he's come to get where he is now. Pig Feet featuring Childish Major. This is my favorite song on the album, and I really wish we could have gotten a music video for it. The title obviously refers to the police, i.e. pigs. It tells a story of what it's like being targeted by the police and living under constant police presence. Ultimately, this song is about Q's past, growing up in an environment where you have to be careful of who you trust because pigs or snitches could be all around you. The song sounds extremely menacing and aggressive with a lot of distortion. Q sounds really angry, especially towards the end, which is hilarious because right after this track is Smile, which in contrast sounds very uplifting and ends the album on a positive note. This track is short, sweet, and introspective. It's like a love song that emphasizes how having something good isn't worth it if you feel like you're missing something else, using metaphors to compare and contrast the importance of that value. I love how the track ends with Q saying that's it as he breaks the fourth wall lyrically. Finally, let's look at the album cover. Despite blue lips meaning speechlessness, the lips on the album cover aren't silent or speechless at all. They're smiling or laughing with the explicit sign placed cleverly inside of the mouth. Given that Blue Lips is Q's album to break out of this box that he feels trapped under or with speechlessness, the lips on the cover could suggest that Q isn't actually speechless at all anymore. They also could be laughing after this period of self-reflection and acceptance. This album came with really cool photography as well. You see like a lot of people inside with blue lips, and then the definition for blue lips is like right here. The inside sleeve also has really cool photos as well, like you get the iconic blue lips themselves. I also really love this photo a lot. There's this image of a child drinking milk from a blue nipple that I thought was so smart because then the child would be born with blue lips and the mother also has blue lips. Anyways, I love this photo. I thought this was really cool. I also love the color of the vinyls. Like, this is probably a big selling point for me because I was just like, this is just a beautiful shade of blue. Like, I'll be very honest, my favorite color is actually red, but this color is so mesmerizingly beautiful that I think my favorite color might be blue now. Blue Lips is an amazing album. You can tell how much thought and detail went into every single aspect of it, especially given all of the art and film references used with a lot of meaning. I've been a big fan of Q since high school, and you can really see how he as an artist broke barriers by doing something so different than what he's done before, really showing the passion and effort that he puts behind his work and music. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.